Most men don't die broke because they were lazy. They die broke because they were obedient. They followed the plan exactly as it was handed to them. School, job, paycheck, repeat. And they did it with discipline, with sacrifice, with full belief that the system they were inside was designed to reward them for it. It wasn't. And the most brutal part isn't the poverty at the end. It's the confusion. The man lying in a hospital bed at 73, who worked 40 years, who never missed a shift, who raised children and paid his taxes and did everything right, and still has nothing that could outlive him. He doesn't understand what went wrong. Because from where he stood, he did everything he was supposed to do. That confusion is not an accident. It was built into the design. What you are about to hear is not motivational. It is not a list of habits. It is a cold, surgical explanation of exactly why this keeps happening, to your father, to men around you, and to the version of you that never questions the game he's playing. Machiavelli understood this 500 years ago. Most men never will. There is a story that gets told to every man from the moment he is old enough to listen. It goes like this: work hard, stay loyal, be responsible, and prosperity will follow. It is told by parents, by teachers, by employers, by governments. It is repeated so many times, by so many voices, that it stops sounding like advice and starts sounding like gravity, like something that simply is true, the way the sky is blue. But here is what Machiavelli observed about men and systems, and he said this in a world far more openly brutal than ours, so he had no reason to soften it. He wrote that men are so simple and so obedient to present necessity that a deceiver will always find someone willing to be deceived. Read that again slowly, not someone stupid, not someone weak, someone willing. Because the deception is comfortable, because the alternative, admitting that the plan you have been executing your entire adult life was never going to produce what you wanted, is a pain most men will do anything to avoid feeling. So they keep working. They keep telling themselves they're close. They keep believing that one more year, one more promotion, one more sacrifice will tip the scale. And the scale never tips. Because the scale was never designed to tip in their favor. This is not cynicism. This is the mechanism. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. To understand why most men die without wealth, you have to understand what wealth actually is. Because most men are chasing the wrong thing their entire lives and calling it ambition. Wealth is not income. This is the first and most important distinction that almost no one teaches you. A man can earn an enormous amount of money across his lifetime and die with nothing, and millions of men do exactly this every single year on every continent on Earth. Income is a flow. Wealth is what you capture from that flow and put to work independently of your time and effort. Most men capture almost nothing. They earn, they spend, they earn again. The flow passes through them. It never accumulates. They are not building anything. They are maintaining a lifestyle until the income stops, and when the income stops, there is nothing left. This happens because men are taught to value earning, not positioning. From the time you were a child, the question was always some version of, what do you want to be? Meaning, what role do you want to perform in the economy? Not what position do you want to hold? Not what system do you want to own or influence or exit from? Just, what task do you want to do in exchange for money? That framing is not neutral. It locks a man into a labor identity before he is old enough to understand what that means, and the labor identity is deadly. Not because labor is shameful, but because a man who only knows how to trade his time for money has exactly one asset, and that asset gets weaker every single year. Your time diminishes. Your energy diminishes. Your market value in most industries peaks somewhere in your 40s and then begins a slow, quiet decline. The man who built his entire financial life on selling his time is standing on a foundation that is, by design, eroding beneath him. There is something else underneath this that Machiavelli would recognize immediately. Men are kept too busy to think, not busy in the conspiratorial sense. No one is sitting in a room plotting to exhaust you. But the structure of a working man's life leaves almost no space for the kind of cold, strategic thinking that wealth actually requires. You wake up, you perform your obligations, you recover just enough to do it again. And in the thin margins, the commute, the lunch break, the hour before sleep, you consume content that makes you feel informed or inspired without actually changing your position at all. Machiavelli called this the trap of the man who reacts. He wrote that a man who only responds to what is in front of him will always be controlled by whoever designs what is in front of him. Wealth requires the opposite. It requires a man to step back far enough to see the whole board, to ask who built this game, what the rules actually reward, and whether he even wants to keep playing by them. Most men never step back. They are too tired. And that tiredness is not a personal failure. It is a feature of the system, not a bug. Here is what makes this trap so effective. It does not feel like a trap. It feels like progress. You get a raise. That feels like progress. You move to a bigger apartment. That feels like progress. You buy a car that costs more than your father ever earned in a year. That feels like you are winning. None of it is wrong exactly. But none of it is wealth. It is lifestyle inflation wearing the costume of success, and it is one of the most effective ways a man can spend decades feeling like he is advancing while his actual financial position barely moves. The psychology behind this is precise. Human beings measure themselves against their immediate environment. If the men around you are in debt but driving decent cars and going on one vacation a year, then matching that feels like success. You are not comparing yourself to the man who owns the building you rent. You are not comparing yourself to the person whose money works while they sleep. You are comparing yourself to your neighbor, your cousin, your colleague, and relative to them, you look fine. Machiavelli understood that men are most dangerous when they are almost comfortable, not starving, almost comfortable. Because the starving man is desperate enough to change. The almost comfortable man has just enough to tolerate his situation, just enough to justify staying still, and just enough to lose if he risks anything. So he risks nothing. He waits. And while he waits, he ages. There is another layer to this that almost no one talks about: the social enforcement of financial mediocrity. If you come from a working-class family, from a community where nobody has ever built real wealth, then the moment you start thinking differently, the moment you start asking questions that nobody around you is asking, you will feel it. Not always as open opposition. Sometimes as jokes, sometimes as concern, sometimes just as a subtle, persistent pressure to be realistic, to be humble, to not get too big for where you came from. This is not malicious. The people around you are not your enemies. But they are products of the same system you are trying to escape, and systems protect themselves, not through violence, but through culture. Through the stories, a community tells about what is normal, what is possible, and what kind of man tries to go beyond that. The man who breaks free financially almost always has to break free socially first. He has to become comfortable being misunderstood, comfortable being called arrogant or cold or changed. Machiavelli wrote that a man cannot be both loved by the crowd and truly free. Choose one. The men who died rich understood that. The men who died broke chose to be understood. Everyone talks about what poverty costs you in money. Nobody talks about what it costs you in everything else. When a man has no financial position, no assets, no leverage, no independence from his income, he does not simply have less money, he has less of everything. Less time, because he cannot buy it back. Less options, because every decision runs through the filter of what he can afford. Less dignity, in the quiet, private sense, the kind that erodes slowly when a man cannot protect his family, cannot say no to a job he hates, cannot walk away from a situation that is destroying him because he has nothing to walk toward. This is what Machiavelli meant when he wrote that a man without resources is a man without choices, and a man without choices is not truly a man in any meaningful political sense. He is a dependent. He belongs, functionally, to whoever controls his income. His employer, his landlord, his creditors. He performs loyalty not out of genuine alignment, but out of survival. And he knows it. And that knowledge, that quiet, unspoken knowledge that you are not actually free, is one of the heaviest things a man can carry across a lifetime. There is a cost to relationships too, though it rarely gets named this directly. Financial pressure is the single most consistent destroyer of families, of marriages, of friendships. Not because money is more important than love, but because sustained scarcity changes a person. It makes men smaller, more defensive, more likely to resent the people they love most because those people become associated, consciously or not, with the weight of financial failure. A man who cannot provide, not at a lavish level, but at a level that gives his family genuine security, carries a wound that most men never admit exists and never treat. Machiavelli did not romanticize poverty. He had no patience for the idea that suffering builds character. He believed that a man's material circumstances were inseparable from his power to act, to protect, and to build. Strip a man of resources, and you strip him of agency, and a man without agency is not living. He is enduring. That is the cost. Not just money, everything. Before a man can escape a trap, he has to be able to see it without flinching. Most men cannot do this. Not because they lack intelligence, but because seeing the trap clearly means accepting that you have been inside it, possibly for years, possibly for decades. And that acceptance is painful in a way that most self-help content never prepares you for. Machiavelli's method was brutally simple. Strip away what you wish were true, and look only at what is actually true, not what the situation should be. Not what you were promised. What is? This is harder than it sounds because the human mind is extraordinarily skilled at constructing narratives that make current circumstances feel temporary. I'm just in a rough patch. Once this debt is cleared, next year will be different. These are not plans. They are analgesics. They manage the pain of your current position without changing the position. So here is the audit, not a financial spreadsheet, a structural audit of your actual life. Ask yourself, if your income stopped tomorrow, how long could you survive without changing anything? Not comfortably. Survive. Most men, if they answer this honestly, will find the number is weeks, not years. Some will find it is days. That number is not your income. That number is your actual financial position. And for most men, it reveals that despite years of work, despite real effort and real sacrifice, they have built almost nothing that could sustain them independently. They have built a lifestyle. They have not built a position. Then ask, what do you own that works without you? Not your skills. Those require your presence. Not your job. That requires your time. What asset, what system, what position do you hold that generates anything when you are asleep, when you are sick, when you are gone? If the answer is nothing, and for most men it is nothing, then you are not building wealth. You are renting your current standard of living from your own future energy, and your future energy is finite. Then ask the hardest question, who benefits most from you staying exactly where you are? Your employer benefits. Your landlord benefits. The institutions that hold your debt benefit. The advertisers who sell you the feeling of success without the substance of it, they benefit enormously. This is not paranoia. This is a simple mapping of incentives, and when you map it honestly, you will find that almost every major structure in your life is optimized for your continued participation, not your eventual independence. Seeing this is not comfortable, but it is necessary. Because a man who cannot diagnose his actual position cannot change it. He can only feel vaguely dissatisfied, watch videos like this one late at night, and go back to the same life in the morning. Machiavelli had no sympathy for men who could see the truth and chose comfort instead. He wrote that men deserve the governments they tolerate. Extend that principle. Men deserve the financial lives they refuse to examine. Escape is not a feeling. It is a sequence of decisions made in cold blood, with full understanding of what you are leaving behind and what you are walking toward. Most men approach it emotionally. They get inspired, they feel the fire, they make declarations. And 3 weeks later, they are back to exactly what they were doing. Because inspiration without structural change is just expensive entertainment. The first thing that has to change is not your habits. It is your relationship to time. Poor men think in weeks. They plan in pay cycles. Their entire cognitive frame around money is organized around the next 30 days. What is coming in? What needs to go out? What is left? This is not a character flaw. It is an adaptation to scarcity. But it is also the reason poor men stay poor. Because wealth is not built in weeks. It is built in years, in decades, in positions that compound slowly and then suddenly. A man who cannot hold a 5-year vision without abandoning it when the next month gets hard will never build anything that lasts. Machiavelli wrote that the man who only plans for tomorrow will be destroyed by the week after. Extend your time horizon, not as a motivational exercise, as a practical restructuring of how you make decisions. Every financial choice you make should be evaluated not by how it feels today, but by what it positions you for in 5 years, in 10 years. This single shift in time perception, if genuinely internalized, eliminates most of the decisions that keep men poor. The status purchase that impresses people this month, but sets you back 6 months in position. The comfortable job that pays just enough to prevent you from taking the risk that could actually change your trajectory. The relationship that drains resources you could have deployed differently. All of these pass through the filter of a longer time horizon and reveal themselves for what they are, trades that feel good now and cost you later. The second thing that has to change is what you are building toward, not a number, a position. Most men set financial goals in the form of a number. I want to make this much per year, but income is not the destination. Independence is. The question is not how much you earn, it is how long you could sustain your life and grow it without needing to sell your time to anyone. That is the real target, and everything you do financially should be evaluated by whether it moves you closer to that target or further from it. This means identifying your one leverageable asset and going deep on it. Not spreading yourself across 10 different schemes, not chasing every opportunity that feels exciting, not pivoting every 6 months when something new appears. Machiavelli understood that men who try to hold every position end up holding none. Pick the thing that has the most realistic path to producing something independent of your direct labor. A skill that scales, a business that can run without you, an asset that appreciates, and commit to it with the kind of seriousness that makes other people uncomfortable. The third thing, and this is the one most men skip because it is the least comfortable to admit, you have to leave rooms that have a ceiling, not people, rooms. Environments, contexts. If every person in your immediate financial orbit is at the same level as you, if no one around you has done what you are trying to do, if the conversations you have about money are always about survival and never about positioning, you are in a room with a ceiling. And you can work harder, you can want it more, you can sacrifice more than everyone else in that room, and you will still be limited by what that room believes is possible. This does not mean abandoning your family or betraying your community. It means deliberately, strategically adding new rooms to your life. Rooms where different assumptions operate, where people talk about ownership instead of employment, about position instead of paycheck, about the decade ahead instead of the month ahead. These rooms exist. Access to them is harder for some men than others. That is a real and honest truth. But the pursuit of access to them is non-negotiable if you are serious about changing your financial reality. Machiavelli wrote that a prince who surrounds himself only with men who think as he does will never see what he cannot already see. The same principle applies to any man trying to build something. You need proximity to people who have already solved the problem you are working on, not to copy them. To recalibrate your sense of what is possible. Finally, and this is the part that requires the most honesty, you have to make the exit decision, not an exit from life, not an exit from responsibility. An exit from the specific systems and structures that were never designed to make you free. This looks different for every man. For some, it is leaving a salaried position to build something they own. For some, it is redirecting a specific percentage of every paycheck, without exception, into a position that compounds quietly over years. For some, it is the simple, cold decision to stop funding a lifestyle that feels successful and start funding a future that actually is. The exit decision is not one dramatic moment. It is a series of smaller decisions, each of which costs you something comfortable in exchange for something durable, and most men will not make them. Because the comfortable thing is always right in front of you, and the durable thing is always years away. But you already know this. You have known it for a while. The question was never whether you understood it. The question was always whether you would act on it before it was too late. There is something this video has not told you, and it is deliberate. Everything covered here, the diagnosis, the trap, the escape, is about getting to a position of wealth. But Machiavelli's deepest warning was never about acquiring power. It was about what happens to a man after he acquires it, Because the same weaknesses that kept a man poor, the short time horizon, the need for approval, the comfort seeking, do not disappear when money arrives. They evolve, they find new expressions. And they destroy men who built real wealth just as efficiently as they destroy men who never built anything at all. That is a different conversation. A harder one. But it is the one that actually separates the men who changed their bloodline from the men who simply had a good decade. Most men who watch something like this will feel it deeply in this moment, and then the feeling will fade, and they will return to exactly what they were doing. Not because they are weak, but because the system they are returning to is very good at absorbing small awakenings and converting them back into compliance. You are still watching. You did not click away when it got uncomfortable. You sat with the diagnosis even when it named things you recognized in your own life. Machiavelli wrote for princes, for men who intended to rule their own circumstances rather than be ruled by them. Most men will never read him. Most men will never sit with ideas like these long enough for them to actually land. You already did. That is not inspiration. That is a different operating system, and the men who run that system are not the ones who die wondering what went wrong.